this has been a topic on, I think, all of our minds for a while now, and just the momentum just keeps building. Here I just jotted down some things I've seen lately. The numbers are staggering in a way. 73 million people listen every month to a podcast, about 26% of the population. That forecast seems even a little conservative by 2022, I guess. I think another number there is important I've heard is that 69% listen on a mobile device. So that's one thing to keep in mind. I think Blake will talk more about this later, but time 23 minutes. Somebody I heard last week says that might be a good sweet spot. I was even amazed last week. We were a meeting here, and the moderator said, "Who's listened to a podcast today?" I think 25 of the 30 people raised their hand, and so that's and the ages were fairly diverse. I think as advertising and sponsorships are just going to increase. What did they say? 257 million in 2017. So there are more opportunities there. And also about the audience. You're also getting a very diverse audience listening, age-wise, gender, ethnicity. I think that's another reason that we all need to consider this. John McManus, I know you had a couple thoughts on our topic today.
Yeah, and I just wanted to say thanks again for everyone, especially those who haven't joined this call before. I just want to sort of contextualize a little bit of where this falls and what Ron and I try to do. I mean, we're of the belief that if we have focus on opportunity areas as well as the challenges and pain points that we all deal with, that this call will be of value to you. This is certainly one of the opportunity areas, and when we can kind of highlight best practices and some bright spots in terms of where there's a great opportunity, we want to bring that into this kind of forum and share it and make it so that in all ways, I think if we're all doing a better job at empowering our audiences and engaging with them and making them so they're more effective, then I think it speaks to a lot of our individual team success and things like that. So when we hear from you on these calls, it helps us to continue to develop the thread of addressing those opportunity areas and pain points. So please speak up when you get an opportunity to weigh in on some of the presentation today. And just the last thought is, Ron, this is sort of a showcase in what Ron does each of these calls, which is that the topic is just a topic, but he makes a story. He produces kind of an experience for us, and I really appreciate working with Ron on these things. So thanks so much.
Okay. Thanks so much, John. I appreciate it. Okay, well, we'll move forward to presentations. We're really fortunate to have Blake Althen with us. Mike was able to get him in June for another conference that we do, and we were all really impressed and with the presentation he gave, and really great to have him back here. So Blake, why don't I hand it to you here?
Hey, great. Thanks, Ron. So hi, everyone. My name is Blake Althen. I'm a producer and actually was a composer. I'll save my bio for later. You can look that up on LinkedIn. It's Blake Althen. Humanfactor.net or Human Factor Post is our websites. We do a lot of work with discovery and A&E and things like that on one side. And then by sheer dumb luck, to be honest, we happen to live on the Alexandria-Arlington border. We fell into this podcast. The majority of our clients are trade associations. I'll drop some names and then I'll get started. National Association of Convenience Stores. We work with Retail Federation, APIC, American Dental Association, and I could just keep spewing those off if anyone really cared. But so what I thought I'd do, instead of having a gazillion slides, is I would just go through all the questions that I'm asked before we start a show, because I'm just going to kind of assume at this point that a lot of people are interested in starting shows, and then I'll do questions were asked for people that have shows. So the first thing I'll do is questions were asked, and then I'll do. Okay. So sorry. So then I'll do other things to consider. That'll be next. Things you may not have thought of, like flash briefings on Alexa, which is coming. And then the first set of questions I ask when we start a meeting. So, Ron, first, there's a whopping 3 slides I have here. How do we get started with a show? That's obviously the first question I'm asked, because there's a lot of variables. And I thought the interesting way to do it might be the way we get started, and then if you're interested in doing it yourself, you can just model what we do if you're in another state or what have you. We do it we have a 3-part approach, where we would sit down and we define the goals of why are we making the show. What do we define as success? That's like the first thing we always do. The old, all the cliches and the analogies of you can't, without a map you can't get there. We write it down on the first meeting. So we might say that we're trying to reach. If it's a trade association, we'll use the footwear association, which is one of the groups we work with. Are we trying to reach middle management? Are we trying to reach the people who work in stores? Are we trying to reach, what niche are we trying to reach? Because podcasts are great for reaching niche audiences. So we're just wonderful because you can dive in depth. So that's the first thing we do is we sit down for about an hour and a half. We define the goals. Then we define, we write out everything. What's the name of the show? How should it feel? We call this kind of our stoner talk. How should it feel? Should it be jovial? Should it be real serious and buttoned up? And we sit down and we write the name of the show. We come up with some copy, like, you're listening to the Ron Show, sponsored by such and such. And we'll even put fake sponsors in just so we can show it to the board later on. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So we get a lot of the sorry, there's some feedback coming on my speakers. We get a lot of the sort of the manual labor that my company would do or what you would have to do after this. We pick music, we find a voiceover artist, we book a day to record. Then the second day we would record 4 to 5 episodes. And we try out different segments. We'll try out different hosts. We'll try out different methods. We don't try to go for it all on the first show. We produce 5 or 6. Like the television networks, they have pilots and they get lots of pilots. We sort of do the same thing, except it's all the same show. So we'll keep calling it the Ron Show. So we have Ron. We'll try a co-host. And as an example, like we work with the Convenience Store Association, and we found their sweet spot a lot of times is anything having to do with store design, anything having to do with fuels, and what was the other one? Anything having to do with, to be honest, Amazon Go, which is the new convenience store that's coming where you don't have cashiers. And we found that out in this sort of discovery process that we do. And it's not that we have to do it. You can do this too if you want to. It's just a lot of work. And then the third thing we do is then we meet back 5 days after we present everything. We build a mock website, and I'll talk about that in a minute. And we present it all. Now, you guys have, you guys meaning the client we'd be working with, you have 5 or 6 shows that are ready to go, and you can show them to your board or your brass or your executive director and say, or your members, and say, is this good? Is this something we want to do? And then the last thing I thought I should mention too, because we were doing this with the Infectious Disease Association, you can also crowdsource a lot of this too. So you can put it out. You can put it out to your members or your customers and say, "Hey, what do you want to call the show? What should the show be called? What should a catchy line be? Submit us some artwork. Write us a song. For the opening theme. We'll take submissions. The winner will get the theme song on the podcast and I don't know $1,000 or whatever, Amazon gift card or whatever it is. So that's sort of and I don't have a ton of time here. I know, so I'm going to try to go through these, but. So that's sort of the process of what we do to start a show from scratch. The next question I get is, what kind of show should we do? Typically, we advise, in the beginning anyway, have it be more of an interview-style show as opposed to like a Freakonomics or a Serial or a This American Life. Those shows are really, really well done, and they take a long time to do. I know because I've worked on, not those shows, but that style of a format. So what do I mean by interview shows? You have an intro. You have, you have a voiceover. Let's say, hey, welcome to the Ron Show, talking about all issues in Connect, and now your host, or maybe sponsored by Coca-Cola, and now your host, Ron. And then Ron can come on, say we're going to talk about, maybe banter a little bit with his co-host. We're going to be talking about podcasts today. We have this guest, etc. Go to the guest and have a sort of a guest-based show at first. That said, if you can actually get people, if you can get a show where you don't need guests, that can be powerful too, because now you're not always relying on guests. But a lot of that will show itself as you go along. But what kind of show should we do? The answer to that, I would say, is sort of an interview-style show to start. It's not to say that you can't go and try to do something more editorial or like not fiction, but where you have, you're going on location and getting clips and trying to assemble them together like a This American Life. It's a great thing to shoot for that. But at first, when we start an interview-style show like a Joe Rogan or something like that, it's great to start. This is the next big one. Should we do it in-house or do we need the studio? This is a really interesting question because I have half my associations love to come in and make a day of the recording. So they'll come in at 9, they'll record till 5. We'll get 6 to 10 shows, and that gives them enough content for the month, maybe a month and a half. And you'll find you'll get, like a bunch of people will come out. They make it a production. They make it a fun day for everyone to come out and record show after show after show. That said, that may not be possible for a lot of people. As an example, I won't name names, but one of the big associations has a pretty high up person who hosts the show, and he can't get to our studio for an hour or for 8 hours and take off an entire day. So what we did with that is we put in a studio for them. They can record whenever they want or whenever they have a big member coming through or a big guest or someone who's big in their industry come through their office, and they can interview them there and then send us the audio. We can put it up on our host. We can put it to their website. We put it to all the platforms, iTunes, Stitcher, all the Google Play, all the main platforms. But on the side note on that, iTunes is always the biggest one, without question. It goes iTunes, Google Play, and then everybody else.
But Blake,
yeah, hello.
Let me interrupt you. Do you know there's that slight reverb still? Do you know what that's coming from?
I'm just talking to my computer. Should I jump to my phone?
Maybe. Oh, yeah, it's worth a try.
All right. Sorry, I will dial in right now real quick.
Okay.
Stand by.
Sorry about that, everyone.
No worries. 2 seconds. I was going to type in this little code you gave me.
Welcome to Ready Talk. Please. Thank you. Stand by.
Okay. Is this better?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks. Sorry about that, everyone.
No worries. No, sorry. If you can't hear me, you can't hear me. We hooked them up with this. We hooked up this organization with the rig in their office. Is the sound quality the best? No, but it's content first before sound quality, and then we can do a lot of stuff here to clean it up. It really depends upon how you can get stuff done and how you want to work. Part of that isn't that discovery process that we do, but that you could also do. When you do that pilot process, like, can we do this? Are you intimidated by pushing a lot of buttons? What kind of gear should you have? You want a little hard disk recorder, or do you want to have a big computer rig with soundproof rooms and the whole thing? And we've installed stuff to that level where we're putting up sound foam, and then we've done other rigs where it's 2 mics, 2 headphones, and a little hard disk recorder. So that really comes down to what is the level that you guys want to be interested in? How many listeners should we expect? This is so relative. And then I'm gonna go into expect and what is appropriate. So if I asked you right now, in fact, I'll do it like this. The Shoe Association, when I first sat down with them, I told you I asked them their goals, and they told me their goals. And I said, if you had 5 listeners, would you guys continue to fund this show? And they kind of looked at me and, said, what's this guy talking about? I said, but what if those 5 listeners was the CEO of Reebok, Nike, Birkenstock, Adidas, and Puma? would you continue to fund this show? You have 5 listeners, and they all nodded their head up and down and said, absolutely, heck yeah. But with that said, your average trade association, I have some organizations getting anywhere from 1,000 to 20,000 downloads a month. And but it's not so much what the advertisers, a lot of them are looking for are not necessarily huge numbers, but you're going right to the person that you're trying to reach. The Convenience Store Association, as an example, Wilbur Curtis was one of their sponsors, and they sell coffee equipment. I mean, like when you go to McDonald's, you can see like their coffee equipment there. Well, like what better organization to sponsor than the Convenience Store Association, whose listeners are, even if they're doing 5,000 downloads a month, those listeners are all people that either own or are heavily involved in the convenience store business. So they'll do something like, hey, this is Wilbur Curtis. We make coffee equipment. Come by our booth at the trade show, booth 6616, and say you mention Convenience Matters. That's the name of their show. Mention that, and we'll give you, I don't know, free. You'll enter into an iPod drawing or whatever it is. I'll leave that to the marketing people to figure out what to do. So how many listeners can you expect? I've been trying to find a magic formula, and I just don't know. I've seen small trade associations come blowing out of the gate, and I've seen giant ones in marketing departments get nothing. And but like I said, I think what you can expect, what I've seen is anywhere from 1,000 to 20,000 a month in the association. That's not to say that if you're a bigger brand selling something bigger and more impressive that you can't get huge numbers. This is my world, sort of in the association space. When it comes to podcasting, we do a few private things, but it's mostly trade association, that sort of thing. Should we put it behind a paywall? Short answer, no. But with that said, I have seen some people do it in association world where they'll have some sort of like breakdown of data. People don't listen to podcasts typically. You open up your phone, you go to your podcast app, and you push play. If there's that barrier in front where you got to go to a website and then you got to log in, then find the show, then hit play, and then what happens when your browser turns off on your phone? You know, like when your phone goes to sleep, I've seen it turn off. I think it's American Association of Community Colleges. They did it for a few episodes, and then I think finally they took it out because it was just too hard for members to get to and people to get to. That's just my opinion. That there might be a reason for you to do it. My experience. What should we talk about? This is I'm surprised I get this from trade associations a lot of time, but I do. What should we talk about? Is a lot of you open your newsletter. What are your talking points? What's going on in your industry? Bring a thought leader on and talk about the latest issues. If you're doing legislation, if you're again a trade association, what are the topics of the day? Talk about, if you're a company, talk about like if you're private sector, I would say go in and talk about people who are using your products. Bring on some success stories of people who are using the product in the way that you want to highlight. So there's a lot of things on that. And then what kind of analytics can we get? There's always someone in the room who's just like drooling to ask that question. On this hosting service we can tell where they're coming from, like the part of the country. We can tell for Apple iOS, I think 11 and above, you can tell it's in beta, but you can tell how long somebody's listened. You can say what device they're on, whether it be Apple or Google, or if they're listening on a desktop or mobile, etc. So you have all that. And then we have some other interesting, I'll call them tricks, to try to get more data. But that's the basic stuff of what you can get and expect from a podcast. No, we don't know if it's a female ages 35 to 45 right from the software from Apple or from whatever hosting service you use. And if there is one, if there's something out there that tells you, if someone knows about something, please let me know. But as of now, there's nothing. So there's some other little tricks, though, that you can do. So as an example, if we take a mailing list and using Higher Logic, we've seen people send out surveys where it says, what did you think of this? What did you think of the presentation today? And that'd be like question one. Then question two might be, do you listen to podcasts? And if they hit yes, you would say, have you heard the Ron podcast? And then they can hit yes. And now we know that person, because of your CRM or your AMS, that person, we know who they were, and that they listen to podcasts, and that they listen to the show. So it's Ron, age, whatever age he is, and you know that info coming back from the survey. And then, of course, the other thing, which I'll talk about in a minute, is doing shows live, meaning like at a convention or at an event. Obviously, it sounds silly, but we got a ton of data from it, I think it was the convenience store convention, where we were set up and they were doing their show live on like sort of a panel, except it was, big lights and the whole thing. And there's, hundreds of people in the audience. We just put out simple postcards on the chairs before we started. Same questions. What do you want to hear about? Have you listened? Are you a fan? I forgot exactly the questions, but we put out a little questionnaire, said fill it out, and then we threw it in a basket on the way back, and we got like 700 people. About half of them already listened to the show, but now we know who they are. It's Jenny, and she works in a convenience store in Iowa, and she's a mother of 2 or what have you. Whatever data they want, it's real easy to get. So there's some other more creative ways, we'll say, to get to this. Ron, how am I doing on time?
I'd say about 10 minutes.
10 more minutes? Okay, great. I can do this. Live events. I talked about that. Live. Flash briefings. I'll do this real quick. This is coming. If anyone hasn't tried it yet, if you have an Alexa, say, Alexa, play Flash. I should say that quietly in case I have anyone on speakerphone. Alexa, flash briefings. And it will read you the flash briefings you've signed up for on Amazon if you're a Prime member. I don't even know if you need to be a Prime member. So case in point, Association Chat is one of the shows I work on. And if you go to Amazon and you write Association Chat, you can sign up for it. And then in the morning when you wake up and you say, Alexa, play me my flash briefings, it will play you the New York Times and your trade association or your company or your show or whatever it is, a little 2 to 5 to 10 minute briefing. Now, right now, in the trade association space, we're just doing Monday mornings. We're starting to do Monday mornings on that because it's a lot of work to produce that every single day. But there's no reason you can't do that. And then at the end of the flash briefing, you can say, for more information on that topic, check out our podcast at convenience-matters.com or shoeandshow.com or the5secondrule.com or whatever it is. So the flash briefing can be a lead to going to the podcast later on that day. Or that heck, you can even say, Alexa, play Convenience Matters. See, so it's sort of this funnel, starting out with something real small, going to the bigger show. I might skip stitching. Let's go to this because I'm going to jump to segments for influencers. So here's an example. I'll use the Shoe and Show because we're just keep talking about that. And to be honest, they'll be in the studio tomorrow, so I'm thinking about them. So they have a woman on every week or every other week named Tiffany Beers, who is she helped design the Nike Hyper Adapt, which is the self-lacing shoe you guys may have seen in the paper now. So in the industry, she's huge in the shoe industry. She's brilliant. She's well-spoken, and she's now a freelancer, but she used to work with Nike. So every other week, they have her on, and she'll talk about something with technology or design. So why would they do that? Well, obviously now they're getting more publicity because she's got her own Twitter feed. She's got her own blog. She's real has a big social presence as opposed to being brilliant and a great designer. And so by combining efforts with an influencer, they get great content, and they get double the promotion, and more people hear about it. Other things to consider. I'm going to skip stitching because that can be kind of complicated. If you have questions, email me or call me or whatever. Separate websites. So this is something that I'd say 90% of our clients do, whether we do it with them or not. We don't really care. But at the end of a show, imagine if you were saying, all right, so Ron, this has been a great podcast. Go to the afca.org/podcasts for more information. Or would you rather say, go to the Ron Show? So a lot of times we'll have a separate sort of off but on branded website for that show. So anyone who's listening, if you go to Convenience Matters right now or shoeandshow.com, you can see we have it. It doesn't look like the association. You can see their picture. You can see their interests. Sometimes we do things like fun facts about Ron and be like your favorite book, app you can't live without, pizza, wine or beer, whatever it is. And it humanizes the show a little more. And then let me see. You got to work with the rest of your team. So I feel like this is overlooked a lot. I don't know. We only have a few private sector shows, but at least in trade association land, we find that like the magazine department's off doing their thing, and the email people might be doing their thing, and then the events people are doing their thing, but there's not a lot of synergy. And we tried to close that gap, and it worked really well. So now I'm actually holding it right now, the magazine that comes out every week for Convenience Matters, and it's got a picture of the podcast. And then the podcast was talking about a bunch of data that was in the magazine and went back and forth. But the picture was from the convention, and it was them sitting down with Mike Rowe, the Mike Rowe of Dirty Jobs on Discovery. They were sat down with him and talked about employment because it's hard to find employees now for convenience stores. So it was a triple whammy, if you will. The magazine covered it, and they pumped the podcast. At the end of the podcast people said, and for more information, check out this month's magazine. Page 216, you can read the rest of the interview with Mike Rowe, whatever it is, blah, blah, blah. So you can see there can be a synergy there with all that. And then lastly, Ron, thank you. So in the I already did that 5-lister thing, great. So we try in the first meeting, I talked about goals. I talked about, we talk about, who is the person. And then we actually try to create and or find, we call it Bubba internally here. But who is we try to create a LinkedIn profile of who is it you're talking to exactly. And sometimes even in the studio, we had some people that were very dry. We would put up a picture of a store manager. I think it was a retail federation. We would put up like a picture of like the person they're talking to in the studio. And that makes it crystal clear of like who you're talking to. Speak their language. If it's CEOs you're going after, let's speak CEO language. If you're not going after CEOs, if you're going after, here's an example. The shoe industry, they have a wide range of people they're going after. They have literally the CEO, Steve Madden was, I'm told. And they have like the CEO of Shoe Carnival. That's a really big deal in some parts of the country. Shoe Carnival is a huge chain. At the same time, they also have sneaker enthusiasts and they have designers. So the first half of their show is always sort of the business side, economics, like they have a lot of tariffs. They're very concerned with the trade deals that Trump's doing now or not doing. And they talk about that. Then the second half of the show, they do a fashion segment where a 20, I think Jasmine's about 26 or 27. She comes on and does a fashion segment where she talks about the trends for next spring and stuff like that. But it's not trends for next spring like you see on the E! Network. It's trends for what stores should be purchasing. It's very niche-y. And then the last thing on this list for me, and I think I pulled it off in time here, Ron, is the releases. I see it especially in trade associations, but I also see it in private land too. You see not a consistent show coming out. Now, I like a show to come out personally weekly or in a seasonal capacity. So January 2nd through March, 31st, we're going to do a show every week, and then we're going to stop, take a break, and then pick it up again in the summer or the spring or whatever. Or, like, if you can't pull off a show weekly, our show comes out the first and third Wednesday of every month. So that gives a consistency, and also it's kind of like a trainer in a sense. Like, I go to the gym every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Come hell or high water, I'm there, It's the same kind of thing. Having a consistent show builds the habit that somebody wakes up in the morning on Monday morning, if you're consistently on Monday, and on their drive-in on Monday morning, they listen. I personally listen to This American Life every Monday morning when I drive into work. So I think I beat that horse to death. Consistency in a show, seasonal, whether it's going to be seasonal, every Monday, every Tuesday, whatever it is, and then I can talk briefly about how to market it, then I'll shut up and about not how to market it, how to get a little bit more analytics, because I just thought of one more thing they do. So you release a show on a Monday, and here's how it goes. When you release a show, it goes to what's called an RSS feed, and it goes to iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and all the other platforms, right? So typically we don't do any kind of promotion on that day. The reason is we want to see on the Monday how many people are just listening because they're in the habit of it, and they get the feed and they listen. Tuesday we'll do an email blast. So Tuesday we did an email blast. That goes out, and now we can get a metric on how successful that was. And we can get, and in that, because of their CRMs or their AMSs, they actually can know who opened stuff too, and that's pretty cool. Then they'll wait another day, let that kind of go through the cycle. Then we'll do a Facebook boost or a LinkedIn boost or an Instagram post or something like that, whichever platform they're strongest in, and we can try to measure that against the and see what kind of results that gets. That's personally what we like the Monday morning release. And the last thing on that, and then I'm done, or I can take questions. The last thing on that is on Monday, well, in a trade association space or in a sort of a B2B space, which is this kind of is, does anyone really want to listen to your trade association podcast, Friday? You're done with work, it's the end of the week. But Monday we've had a lot more success. That said, I'm more of an entertainment show. Friday we've had success with, like we do a show called Designated Drinker. We don't do as much with that anymore, which is part of like the Bartenders Association. And they had kind of a show where they would do drinks, and they would drink while they were doing the show. And they pair food with it and talk about the liquor, and they just do a show on fine liquor. And that show came out on Thursday and Friday. So,
all right, yeah, that's a good note. That's a good note to toast off with.
Yeah.
Thanks, Blake. If you can stay with us, we'll get.
Yeah, I'll hang out.
Okay, all right. I have a couple questions, but we'll get to them later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Take it away,
I want to bring on Terrey Hatcher from Relias Media. Terry, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. Hi.
Okay, great. This is good. I know Blake spoke a lot about other associations and groups, and there is a lot of similarities to publishing companies and information companies, but I think here you'll get a little more specificity from Terry with a publisher podcast. Okay, take it, Terry.
Okay, great. We're getting some feedback if anybody needs to mute themselves, but I'm glad to be here today. Yeah, did you want to say something, Ron?
No, I was just agreeing with you if others can mute their phone.
Yeah, so I'm on the other end of the spectrum from Blake. We decided to start a podcast at Relias Media, sort of on a shoestring budget, and I'll tell you some quick background. I don't want to go into too much detail. Blake covered a lot of the important points, but so quick background on my company. Our parent company is Relias. We do analytics, assessments, and learning for healthcare professionals. And our podcast we branded it Rounds with Relias. We wanted to make clear that what we're providing is for providers, healthcare providers, not for the general public. And Relias Media, my division, produces 24 publications, and the topics range from different areas such as primary care, neurology, OBGYN, case management, emergency medicine. So we did a pilot about a year or so ago, and we knew it wasn't probably our long-term goal, but we had a professional narrator read one of our monograph publications, which is 12 pages, one article. You can imagine that's pretty boring. But what our audience, most of our audience comes to us for continuing education credits in healthcare, doctors and nurses, and then other staff. So we wanted to give them a chance to listen while they're driving. Like you said, a lot of people want to listen to podcasts while they're driving to work or doing something else, multitasking. And we figured that was a good test of how the technology worked, how long it would take us to put it together, what other challenges we had. After we did that for a while, we could tell we weren't getting the listeners we wanted, and we had enough to draw some conclusions. So we did a survey of our target audience, and from that, we asked those questions you see there, what kind of content they find most valuable, whether they did want continuing education credits in a podcast. We did ask the question about what's the target length, and we came to the same conclusion that you did, Ron, that about 20 minutes is good. We shoot for 15 to 30, and most of them are right around 20. And then we also wanted to know what would they be willing to pay for. So you can go to the next slide, Ron. So from that, we again settled on 15 to 30 minutes, the more popular format of an expert talking to an interviewer, and give a more sense of community. And so mostly we have physicians, sometimes other healthcare professionals as our expert guest. And the content is focused on research trends in the field. We did decide not to offer continuing education credits and to offer it for free. As Blake said, there's challenges with charging for these kinds of podcasts. So we're on to the next slide. And our second round is a rebooted podcast. We looked at questions: should we book a recording studio? Should we do things like Blake talked about, do a whole bunch of interviews at once and then space them out when we release them? Maybe go to a medical college where we have doctors who work with us all the time and do a bunch there, or maybe go to a conference. Ultimately, you can skip to the next one. Ultimately, we decided that we would go ahead and use, no, you can go on. Yeah, we would go, oops, one back, sorry. We would go ahead and use our in-house editor who is used to, we have several editors, but one who's used to doing the research, interviewing experts, and would be available when we wanted. And we already use WebEx to do webinars, paid webinars, so we thought, well, we can use that technology. We know it's not as professional as an audio editing booth, but we do have our own sound booth, luckily, because our parent company produces online training, so we have narrated courses. So we were lucky enough to have that. We decided not to do something where we send out a professional microphone to the person who's being interviewed. We said, well, hey, it's okay if it's not top quality. It's okay if there's ums and ahs and pauses in the conversation. We wanted it to be a conversation. And most of them will dial in using the phone or the computer headset. And then we have the Adobe Creative Suite. So we use Audition for editing the audio in-house. And again, we had some expertise on staff with that. You can go to the next one. And so then we decided should we have a physician be the host? Should we have a staff person? And we settled on, like I said, the editor. And it was interesting because he was relatively new to our team. And so he had to learn Audition, and we had a lot of learning curve to do. But he's able to do the research and have an initial conversation with the expert to get them comfortable. And that's worked out real well for us. So you can go on to the next slide. And a couple of the challenges we had were, again, some of the things Blake talked about. What are we going to use? What platform are we going to use for hosting? How are we going to set up our web pages for the podcast? How are we going to track the listens? What kind of user data can we track? And we can move on. Next slide. And so we settled on our CMS is e-publishing, and e-publishing recommended SoundCloud for hosting. So we figured we'd better go with that. And we settled on SoundCloud Pro. It's cheap, $12 a month. And we purchased some music for the intro and outro. And as Blake said, we'll have an intro, Welcome to Rounds with Relias. And so we also had a web developer on our team to set up the whole pages for us, set up the widgets. And we did find, as Blake said, Apple is the biggest avenue, and RSS feeds. We do Google Play, and we also do Stitcher. Okay, next. So here's an example of one of our episode pages, how we set it up. And, we branded with Rounds with Relias. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll see that what we do also is we advertise. On each of those episode pages, we advertise for our own publications. So this one's on stroke, and we choose two of our publications to promote with each podcast. This one's Neurology Alert, and then we have a book called Stroke that we published, or that we promoted on that one. So we figure out which ones align with the content in that particular episode. So we're getting some in-house promotions. We have those same ads in the audio version where we'll say, for more information on this topic, check out Neurology Alert or subscribe. And then we also do some promotions where I'll write a news brief on our main webpage, not for everyone, but if I think it's got a newsy enough angle, then I'll do that, and then link to the podcast and link to the publications that are related. I'll post it on my LinkedIn page. Our social media for the company will post it. And you can move to the next slide. And then how we promote the podcast is, in marketing newsletters. I mentioned we have 24 different publications. So in every issue of every publication, we have a little link to the podcast, and the subscribers get an email announcing, okay, your January issue of Neurology Alert is available. And at the bottom of that, they have a link to the podcast. And then we created these house ads like you see here that will promote a particular episode that ties in with that particular publication. So our editors can use that as a space filler if they want to tie it in and link to it. Okay, next one. Some of the lessons we learned, obviously you want to have a good connection. You want to have someone who speaks with a voice that's appealing to your listeners. We have found some people will be a little too scripted, or maybe they are a low talker or a loud talker. So you have to be able to edit it and take some time to do that editing if you're doing it on your own like we are. And it really helps if you have an interviewee who will promote it to their own social media network. So, they may put it on their LinkedIn, or they may send an email out to their colleagues. That will really help boost your listens, and you can move on to the next page. And it will also help you in terms of, reaching new audiences, which is our goal. So we launched this as a way to increase our visibility, reach that mobile market, and a lot of the physicians who are subscribers to our publications are, getting near retirement age. So we wanted to find a way to try something new, try to draw in new listeners, new potential subscribers. And our numbers are very low compared to the numbers that Blake quoted. So we have very modest goals, but we are seeing some success. We are seeing that we are getting many more listeners, and hoping that we're getting the message out about our valuable content in new ways. And also, it's really helped internally in terms of our sense of community. I have 7 different team writers and editors who I manage, and they all collaborate on, here's a good topic for the podcast, or you should talk to this source. This will be a really good person to interview. And then, when you've worked on publications for years, getting to try something different like a podcast has been energizing for the team. And they get to connect with our subscribers, with physicians, with nurses, with staff members. So it's really paid off for us, I think. Thank you.
Oh. Terry, thank you. Did you? I noticed the URL. Do you have a Rounds with Relias also URL, or is it under the company?
We do not. It was interesting when Blake said that. We have reliasmedia.com /podcast.
Yeah. That was I thought that was a good idea, huh? That he said that. Rounds with Relias is so catchy.
Yes, I agree.
People would remember. Okay, thank you very much. We're going to get one more person in and then get a couple questions. Matt, are you out there?
Hi, Ron.
Hey, how do you say your last name? Is it Pais?
Pais, yeah.
Okay. Matt, let me get it up here. Matt is with Million Dollar Roundtable, and we talked a bit last week. And your experience is more, you're going to talk about your experience, and it's I think both our previous speakers talked about loading up at once when you get the people there at an event, and that's sort of what you guys do, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So we release our podcast episodes. Hi, everyone, first of all. We release our podcast episodes monthly, but we really only record these sessions 2 to 3 times a year. So that is such a great motivation to get as much content as we possibly can each time. And certainly the frequency would change if we weren't able to be that efficient, but obviously it's sort of a productive circle that works for us. So we generally do those recordings when we have committees in-house. And what that means is that the folks will spend pretty much their whole day in-house talking about the topic that their committee is focused on, as well as a number of other things. But for the committee that's recording the podcast, we'll take 45 minutes with a group of 4 from the committee, and then another 45 minutes with another group of 4 from the committee, usually doing it after lunch at the time when the group committee discussion might maybe lag a little bit. People are a little bit tired after lunch. They've been going all day, so it's a good thing to change it up for them. And then, as I said, do a 45-minute discussion with them. But during that time, it's such a great challenge for me as the person moderating the discussion to constantly be thinking about the stories that are being shared and what episode titles we've already had and how what they're discussing could possibly lead to an appropriate standalone episode. As we know, we can't have any of our episodes, or really shouldn't have any of them, just called "How to Do Your Job Better," because in theory that's the overarching idea behind everything that we're covering. But we always want to be more specific than that. People who are considering whether or not to spend their time listening to something want to feel like there's going to be more depth than that, and certainly you want to be able to represent that in the headline. So as you see here, the results for a couple recent episodes is why it's okay to tear up your business plan, stories that help explain the need for income replacement. And that's generated simply by going in. Most of these people have never recorded a podcast before. They don't receive any questions in advance. But just by asking them to share stories and challenges, or the wildest thing that's ever happened to them on the job, or the most memorable thing, that, I'm a big believer that if you have to kind of challenge someone to dig deep and remember something in that moment, sometimes they might not be able to get there. But we all have the stories that it's not a matter of the challenge to actually remember. It's just something that you know. And if you can tap into those kind of emotional memories and the things that people have offhand, I like to ask them, like, if you were at a party with other advisors and you were sort of trying to one-up each other hypothetically with what you've experienced, what are the stories that you would go to? And they totally know that offhand. But a really important part of that, I think, is that at the beginning, before we even start recording, before we start the conversation, I give them a clear sense of what we're doing here. Like I said, most of these people have never participated in a podcast recording before, and it would be understandable if they sat down and spoke with some generalities, or it just wound up being kind of a more theoretical discussion. And I just let them know that this is really all about sharing your own experiences and stories and things that you've gone through, so other members can listen and not just hear kind of a general idea of what's been on your mind, but actually say, wow, that's really interesting that you went through this. Either I felt the same way, or I wondered what would happen if that happened to me with a client or a staff member, or that sort of thing. And I encourage them that every time you're sharing something, sharing an idea, please do everything you can to connect that to the client experience or the staff experience that is making you feel that way or share that concept. And part of that engagement is also about connecting with each other during the podcast recording. I say this isn't a chance for me to do 4 simultaneous one-on-one interviews. I'm here to throw some questions out. I will ask some follow-ups as needed, but I encourage you all to communicate with each other, and if someone says something that you want to respond to or ask about, then that's exactly why we're here. That type of episode, I think, is so much more engaging to listen to. You actually get the sense of the human dynamic there. It doesn't feel stiff. It feels just like people actually connecting with each other, and they totally run with that. But if you don't put that context out there at the beginning, you might find yourself during the recording session saying, oh man, each person is answering my question and then looking at me as if they're just waiting for me to jump in, when I wish they would just kind of take the ball and run with it.
And your editing process is interesting. It's you get a transcript, right, from an engineer, and then you work off of that?
Yes. Thanks for bringing that up, Ron. So our Excuse me. So our recording engineer will send along the file. We work with vendors both for the recording and the transcription. So I get the file, I send that along to the service who handles the transcription, and once I get that back, it's honestly not that challenging to go into that and divide it into the episodes, because by being really conscientious during the recording process of what's being gathered, who has participated, who has answered each question, when we sort of hit on everything we need to, then after that recording session is over, I know in my mind, okay, that was going to be 2 to 3 episodes or 3 to 4 episodes, but I know the topics that we touched on, and they're all pretty distinct. So going into the transcript, you can tell, okay, for the first 12 minutes, someone brought up a story about this, and then we jumped on that, and everyone shared what they thought about that, and then we moved on to the next thing. So the whole process, we really have an efficient system in place, and our recording engineer also edits the file for us as well. So once I've divided the transcript into the episodes and thrown the timestamps in there, written the intro and the voiceover and all that sort of thing, then it's just a matter of sending it off to the engineer who records and edits for us. But then we don't need to have all of the files edited at once. We just make sure that each one is ready, of course, a couple weeks before the monthly episode needs to launch. So it's a great way of having, and of course this process may or may not be right for all groups. For us, it's a really great way of having a nice backlog. I would, for a monthly series, I wouldn't want to have that point every month where I was kind of saying, oh, who are we going to talk to, and what are we going to talk about, and how is it going to be different, and that sort of thing, especially just because of the nature of our opportunities to get people in to record in person. So this whole process, it's nice to be able to look at the calendar and know that it's planned out for a certain amount of time, and each time we get people in that recording studio, where the goal is to get a number of episodes each time. And if that doesn't, if let's say it turns into 1 or 2 episodes in one of those 45-minute sessions, then that's okay too. I'd say the minimum would be about 7 minutes or so, maximum usually like 20 if they went a little bit longer on one particular topic. But I definitely believe that the content itself should drive what we do with it. So if we do a recording session and it's all great and we can get a ton of distinct episodes out of it, then fantastic. But if it's the case where it just didn't go as well as the others usually do, then I would rather use the good stuff there and then adapt moving forward than put something out there that I didn't think was up to par just because we had established this schedule of recording. So thankfully, we're knock on wood, we're really never in that position. It's fun to be in that recording position and learn the best ways to gather those stories from our members.
All right. Yeah. Well, thank you, Matt. I just wanted to leave a couple minutes here for questions. I did get a couple online. Let me read them, and Blake or Terry or Matt can chime in, or anyone. When making a decision about production quality investment, have you seen any measurable correlation between production quality and engagement, or is it really more about how targeted and relevant the concept and the actual content is? So yeah, we're sort of content versus production quality here.
Is that directed to anybody, or?
Yeah, Blake, you can have a go here.
I look at it like this. If you hear a show come on and it sounds like they're in a tin can, and they're I don't know, the music sounds bad and the mics are not balanced, and what would you think instantaneously? I guess I go back to the my music industry days of when you send a press kit out to an A&R scout, you could send whatever, the Beatles' White Album. But if it came presented on a CDR with a Sharpie saying Beatles' White Album, how impressed would you be? So that said, I don't think you need to be on Here's Some Geek Talk on Norman U87s with super high-end preamps and stuff, but it should sound good. And of course, I'm in the audio biz, so I want it to sound great. But yes, so I think production does matter. It should sound good, but that said, I would sacrifice a little bit of, like I said earlier, I would sacrifice a little bit of quality for content, i.e. I would have somebody record in their office if they're more comfortable and we get a better show and we lose a little bit of fidelity on the mics. I would sacrifice that every single time, and I bet the other two people would agree.
Okay, thanks. We also have, can you talk about how you, again, a little more about how you measure success? Is it about the number of downloads, the number of leads per episode, or per year? Maybe Terry, do you know from those promotions, are you able to see any clicks that come from that or anything like that?
We haven't gotten to the level of tracking those yet. We do hope to down the road, but right now we've just focused on getting the content in line, getting a smooth process. So we would hope to see that. We haven't really tracked it yet.
But you know your number of listeners, you have that, or per episode?
Yes, and of course we want to keep, we can see which ones are most popular, so we can see the kinds of topics that are attracting more people, and we also want to see it go up naturally.
All right. Blake, someone asked, it sounds hard to get demographic data. How do we know that we're reaching the right audience? That's a tough one, huh?
It really is, and I think, I don't know when the person came in, but we have those things we've done with sending out emails, with surveys, the live events. You can literally look out and see when you say, anyone listen to the podcast, hands go up, but that's not going to be your full audience. And then there's actually one last thing I didn't speak about, which I will super briefly, which is every Tuesday at 2. This is not a plug for the show. It's just to show the way we do it consistently. Every Tuesday at 2, we actually do live shows. And with some of the associations I work with, we're actually doing live shows. So it's, live at 2 o'clock. But what we did was actually, I got to give credit to Kiki L'Italian for coming up with this. She has people register with Zoom. It sounds similar to registering with the system we're on here. It's called, Ready Talk. So that way, and since it's live, they'll be able to ask the guests questions. So you'll at least get an email, and maybe you can compare that in your CMS or your AMS to the membership and see who's listening. But unfortunately, yes, the demographics, I hear this from advertisers all the time, like who's listening. I think once the show's been around for a while, you'll get a better gauge of this. I don't know if Terry's had this happen yet at an event or anything, but I've had it happen many times where we'll be at a convention and someone will walk up and they'll hear the host and they'll go, I know your voice. I listen to your show every week. And it happens quite often. But there's no silver bullet, unfortunately, yet that we know of to get actual demographics aside from that survey stuff I was talking about.
All right, thank you. Wow, I'm sure we could probably do another hour on just questions. Does anyone else out there have a question?
Yeah, this is Mike Lavett from Aviation Week. If I could ask another one.
Yes.
Well, maybe two. One, we've had a real hard time getting sponsors. Although what we did do is we have a weekly podcast that we call Check 6, which is fighter pilot lingo, we haven't really gotten a sponsor for that, but we did get a company that offered to do a sponsored podcast where I think the host talks with some of their people, I think, or people who they want to speak, and so it's kind of an indirect sponsorship, but I think it's still a sponsorship. And then the other thing is, will Stitcher negotiate terms? Because I wanted to put us on Stitcher because I use a Droid, not an iPhone, and ran it by legal, and they looked at the contract, and they said, well, can you get them to change this and that? And I finally just, I kind of just dropped it because there's nobody at Stitcher you can call up. It was all online, and I didn't really know how to say, well, we like this contract, but can you change this and that? So anybody know about that?
I doubt they're going to change it. Unless you're like, Joe Rogan or somebody. If you have enormous numbers, maybe. But, they have hundreds and hundreds of podcasts going on now.
Yeah, I know. And I mean, we do pretty well for I think maybe we get 5,000 a week, maybe.
I mean, that's pretty darn good, yeah.
It's good for a B2B. It's not Joe, it's a drop in the bucket for Joe Rogan.
So it's a $5 million a week, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So,
but real quick on your first question, you're an association or are you a company?
No, Aviation Week is a publishing group.
Oh,
we publish magazines, and we're a member of Connectiv, and we publish magazines and paid newsletters and hold events and all that stuff.
Do you do do you have like a one sheet that says all the guests you've had and all the guests that are upcoming and shows all your figures and numbers and things like that?
I'm not sure if they did that or not.
So we did it much like a television network at Upfronts. Upfronts is where the television networks all get together in New York City and try to sell space to. So what we developed is, and we have a new one that's about to come out at the end of this week, where you have a slick, sexy picture, maybe two, and it says, like I'll go back to convenience stores. It will say, hat on William Shatner, hat on Mike Rowe, hat on Joe Sheets of Sheets Gas, hat on the CEO of 7-Eleven, blah blah blah. Upcoming year, planning to have on CEO Quick Trip. The numbers last year we did with you're doing 5,000 a week. That's 20,000 ish a month, over 100,000 downloads, and then I mean even the upfronts they kind of make stuff up a little bit. These television networks, we are the show for make it sexy, like we are the show for you said fighter pilot stuff. So we are the show. And then the other thing that I found that some associations did, which it sounds like it's similar. You have members. You may not have members, but similar is they'll bundle it with other things. Yeah, they'll bundle it with say I'll just use what they do and you can apply it to your business. They might say, okay, hey, you're interested in that 30 by 30 booth. We'll throw in, you'll be on the podcast twice, and we'll give you 6 months we'll give you 6 months of ads. If you buy the booth, we'll throw this in. So they'll make the podcast a sweetener on top. If you're looking for that ad space, all right, you're going to take out that full page ad, okay, and we'll have you on the podcast twice.
Yeah. Okay.
I've seen people do that too. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean we can't really sell position. We don't do pay for play.
Okay.
It's against Connectiv's ethics code, but
you could make it part of a ad package, to get people more used to it.
Yeah. This has been very helpful, though. I really picked up a lot.
Great,
cool.
Great. We're a little over, but does anyone have anything else?
Yes, it's Chris Giordano from CIO. I just was wondering what best practices you had for monetizing and consultants that can master the sound and boost quality on podcasts. 2 questions.
I feel like I've been talking a lot, so maybe the other.
Well, this is Terry. We have regular narrators that we use, professional narrators that we use for our courses. So, I would say finding regular professional audio, audio quality to be your contractors for that would be good. We just happened to have an editor on staff that we felt like his voice was good and he was able to handle it well.
Yeah.
If you go to Hugh, go ahead.
Well, this is Mike again. What we do is we have our editor-in-chief is usually the moderator, and then we have 2, maybe 3 editors who get on, and they just talk about things that were in the news in the aerospace business that week. So it could have been Boeing buying Embraer, or something with the the defense budget or whatever.
And as far as monetization is concerned, what do you find is the most effective way to do that?
You mean literally just charging for ad space? Is that what you mean?
Yeah.
Sponsorships or...
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I didn't get into this, but I can very, very briefly, because I know we're over, but we didn't talk about stitching. So in the hosting stuff we use, you can actually take and place an ad in front of the entire catalog. So if you recorded shows in 2016, I could take your whole catalog and put an ad in front of it and then remove it. So we call it pre-roll. That's pre-roll. Then there's sponsored segments. So as an example, I think the Retail Federation, they do a thing called Rapid Fire at the end of the show where they ask the CEO of Macy's, silly questions like, pizza or beer and, the Coke or Pepsi, that kind of thing. But before it, they put a stitched ad in there. Those are called mid-rolls. You can say, this segment's sponsored by Connectiv, connecting people since 1981 or whatever it is. Check them out online. And then, so you're talking about the exact monetization. You can charge for those inserts. I've seen when people do them live, obviously, there's sponsors who pay for the signage in the room when we do them live. They'll pay for the venue and the sponsor and the signs, and they'll get an ad in the front of the show permanently sometimes. And then, of course, like we said, the pay-to-play model of, hey, they don't like to make it. Most organizations don't like to necessarily advertise that, but if the check's big enough, some of them will be like, okay, yeah, you can come on 2 times in a year. We're not going to plug your product necessarily. Let's say you sell widget A's. We're going to do a show on widget A's, and we're going to bring in the experts who happen to be you. Mm-hmm. Those seem to be the models that I've seen. And, of course, like I said earlier, upselling another product.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Very helpful.
Yeah.
You're welcome.
Good questions. Anything else?
No. Did you record the session? Will it be available for download?
Absolutely. You know what? I'm also going to do a transcript for that also for it. So either way, we'll have both of them up. We're going to have the call and we'll have a transcript, a written transcript.
Cool.
Okay. Yeah. We're gonna John and I need to meet and schedule some more of these. But we do have one set, and that's the annual in-person meeting we do at the Neal Awards. That's on March 29th, usually around 9:30 a.m. And I really encourage anyone that can get there to come. We get some good things out of that, and obviously it's a little different face to face. So and please, as John mentioned before, we really love to hear your ideas and what you're struggling with and what you want to hear more about, and that really drives this committee. Besides, as Mike said, the hard work of everyone, and send it right back to John that it's been a pleasure working with him. So, okay. Anything else from anyone?
Thank you for having me, Ron.
Yeah, and thanks for everyone's patience and participation, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.